Good morning, good afternoon, good evening around the world. My name is Doug Brunke. I'm the founder and CEO of Global Chamber, and I'm like the most fortunate person in the world because I get to meet really fascinating, interesting, valuable people all over the world who have a product or a service that helps people be more successful. And today we've got just that kind of a person, Christina Haxton. She's the CEO and founder at the Center for Sustainable Strategies. And she's going to be talking about something that's hopefully near and dear to you, and certainly been a topic by at least one of the speakers, one of the people in the audience who's been a speaker at Global Chamber, the concept of actually thinking about mental health and managing your employees in a way so that they don't burn out. And the actual title of the event is Actionable Steps for CEOs to Avoid Being Blindsided by Turnover and Top Performer Burnout. When company executives are asked these days, what are the key issues that you're facing? One of them is typically supply chain. Another one is often inflation. And maybe number one is employees and how to retain employees and how to help manage the situation where you've got people stressed to the max. We've got an uncertain world. The businesses are uncertain. And so that creates issues at work that leaders need to adapt to. And fortunately, Christina knows all about that. She, through her background and her history, and especially including the last several years, she's been helping companies get through this and be able to retain companies. And what I love about Christina is, in addition to the strategy, she can actually get stuff done. And in fact, I think in your LinkedIn profile, there was like a hashtag that said no bullshit or something like that. And I thought, that's Christina. It's like no messing around. It's like, here's the situation. Let's get our hands around it and then let's do something about it. So the just do it theme for Nike is one that we certainly believe in once you've really thought about what needs to be done. And fortunately, Christina is able to help companies, first of all, understand what needs to be done. And then secondly, let's get this thing. So Christina, really appreciate you taking the time to share more about this incredibly important topic. I turn it over to you. Let us know.
Thank you so much for that warm welcome. I appreciate that. That's so funny you mentioned about the LinkedIn profile. I almost took that off, but I thought, no, it's true. I'm a big believer in let's focus on what we can control rather than things we can't, like the economy, like inflation, like lots of things, most of the things in our lives. So welcome everybody. I'm so glad you're here, and let's get started. Alrighty, so as Doug said, we help people. Basically, I like to say we help CEOs keep people problems from being profit problems. And I want to start out with some facts. So did you know that in 2021, globally, we hit an all-time high of 44%, which is almost half the people of all global employees feel stress, worry, anger, and sadness on a daily basis. There's, in the US dollars, the cost of additional lost opportunity is approximately $20 million for every 10,000 workers due to struggling or suffering employees. And 15 to 20% of total payroll and involuntary turnover costs on average are due to burnout. That's the bad news. Hi, Christina Haxton. And like many of you, I am a business leader. I'm a serial entrepreneur. I've owned 3 companies. I think this is my 4th. And unlike you, I'm also a recovering marriage and family therapist. And I specialized early in my career in working for about 10 or 15 years, working with business partnerships and small family-owned businesses. So when it comes to people problems, I have just a little bit of experience. So as Doug said, we work with CEOs of small to mid-market enterprises. And what I really appreciate is the fact that we're pretty industry agnostic. And so I get to bring solutions that my clients have implemented across industries and over, with companies and organizations of various sizes. So here's what we're going to cover today. We're going to talk about three, I call them hiding in plain sight mistakes that we see most organizations are making when it comes to keeping great people and making sure they're happy and productive at work. And we're going to talk about what you can do instead. We're going to talk about the two key areas that business leaders really need to be measuring and focusing on, and where they can take action right now to be able to keep employees today and beyond. We're going to talk about the three key strategies you can act on in the next 30 to 60 days to increase resilience, agility, decrease stress, decrease burnout, retain your best people, help them be more agile and resilient, productive, and not only happier at work, but happier at home. And I'm also going to share with you a framework that we use when we support organizations who really want to make sure they get it right the first time when it comes to having the biggest impact with any kind of initiative, change effort, leadership development, or training program. And our experience and our clients tell us that doing so, just by taking this one most important critical first step, they achieve 100% of their goals at least 25% faster than they would have without it. So let me just tell you a little bit today. We're going to go really fast because, like Doug said, I like to get to the get stuff done part. Okay, I don't want to spend a lot of time analyzing and theorizing about why. What I will tell you is that we're going to be interactive in this process. I'm going to ask you to type some of your responses, thoughts, and comments in the chat, as well as questions. Please hold your questions till the end. We will have time for Q&A at the end. So I'm going to go fast. And also I'm going to mention some resources throughout my conversation, our conversation today. If I mention any resources or reports or data points or any resources that we use with our clients and you are interested in that, I'm going to share with you how you can get those at the end. Okay, so let's let her rip. Okay. So first of all, before we go through this slide, I'm curious, I'd like you to type in the chat, what is the biggest challenge you face today as the CEO or business leader in your company or in your industry? And Doug, I'm going to have you read those out for me, if you don't mind, when people type those in. Wish I need the Jeopardy clock. So what's the biggest challenge you face today? Top of your to-do list. Oh, Doug, I think you're muted. You'll have to start over.
So we've got the change and uncertainty, workforce exhaustion, retaining employees. Thanks for your comments, folks. Yeah,
awesome. So as you can see, several of you mentioned talent. Although it's interesting, so this is a summer 22 Fortune Deloitte CEO survey. I can't tell you whether it was a global survey or it's just US, Canada. Deloitte's an international organization, so I'd like to hope that they did a global survey, but they surveyed 116 CEOs just this past in June, and across industries. And here's what they heard. It's so funny because I see this all the time. I love that talent is a problem, but I expect it's going to go back to normal as soon as the economy goes down the drain. CEOs, in my experience, tend to be a little bit overly optimistic and overestimate challenges or underestimate challenges. So I'm going to take that with a little grain of salt with respect to, I'm sure that's what they believe. Don't know if that's necessarily going to be true. We'll see. I see lots of words. Heavy time in the world. Keeping positive is hard. Navigating volatile external environment. Inflation. What's happening in the Ukraine. The pandemic. The Great Resignation. Exhausted workforce. People are having to do so much more with less. And especially now here in the US, we see a lot of layoffs happening. Started with the tech industry. And I have many clients who are in that industry who are really feeling the burnout. In fact, I work with many executives in our executive coaching program. I had to tell you, well over half are looking for better opportunities. and we'll share with you a little bit about if I were working with their CEO, what I would advise that CEO. But I'm not always working with the CEO. Sometimes I'm working with just a high-level executive. But many we talk about great resignation that happened in in 2020, 2021, early 2022. A lot of more entry-level workers, mid-level workers. Now we're seeing a lot of people at the executive level transitioning into other opportunities. So that there was a bit of a delay there. So anxiety, uncertainty, as you can see, top of mind. So, these are the words that stood out to me, and all those things, if nothing changes, and if it continues to get worse, and I can't imagine it's going to go back to, 10, 15 years ago, how things were, burnout, not just at the, at every level of the organization. And that's bad news. That's bad news. So let me just tell you a little bit about what is burnout exactly. Some of you may be feeling it. I'm not going to ask, to share that in the chat right now or not. But, it used to be when I worked with CEOs who were recovering from burnout, it was not something that was talked about. And most people didn't even identify that they were experiencing it. But the World Health Organization has actually determined, that this is it's a problem in the workplace, so much so that they've identified it as such. So 3 dimensions. When I hear clients feeling depletion of energy or exhaustion, increased mental distance, they start to disconnect and kind of have the I don't give a shits, I don't cares, negativism, cynicism related to their job and the future. And definitely some clients that come to me do so because they have had a difficult conversation with their board, for example, or or their boss that says, you're just not performing as well as you used to. So that's what we see happening more so at the leadership level. So there's 3 things here that we want to look at, and we know that burnout is obviously a problem for, let me move things around here. It's a problem for individuals, but it's a problem for companies. Okay, so what's happening is we basically have a very expensive problem, workplace stress, costing the US economy more than $500 billion a year, lost productivity, 550 million workdays. Toxic cultures, I hear a lot about that. Prior to the Great Resignation, if an organization had a poor culture, an underperforming culture, or toxic culture, they didn't make it with respect. People just didn't stay, as you see. It's very expensive because of turnover, not to mention brand and reputation and being able to recruit employees. So depending on the position, turnover can, to replace an employee, I'm sure all of you have heard some version of the statistic, an average of 33% of their salary. And then as somebody is higher up in the organization, we're seeing a lot of leaders, managers, directors, VPs, SVPs, executives leaving with a lot of relationships that they built, a lot of knowledge. And so the cost is much greater than we can put on their salary when we can't retain our key people. And just to give you an example, if you ever wanted or haven't yet figured out what the cost is for your organization, of burnout, if you have 100 employees and you have an average annual turnover rate of, let's just say your entry to mid-level folks are leaving, we're looking at the annual cost of $1.7 million, and that's no chump change. Okay, so here's what I'd like you to do and participate in the chat, please. I want you to tell me what is the impact of burnout, if you just even had to ballpark it right now in your organization, whether you can measure it, have measured it, or just in general. What would you say, what is the most important impact that you're seeing that's really causing you some sleep deprivation, which is another problem? So Doug, if you can, go ahead and let me know what those say in the chat.
Sure. I think one of the ones is lack of business development and brainstorming to grow. I'm not sure. Maybe that's a diversion question, that people are being diverted. Is that what you're thinking? Oh, wanted to stay status quo. Okay, so brainstorm. Okay, I'm not sure what that means, Whitney. Sorry, but I think, is it a diversion question? Is that what you're saying? Oh, people are wanting to stay at status quo, so they're certainly being diverted and exhausted. Thank you. That clarifies it. Leaders are spending time on keeping people motivated, or keeping people inspired, to keep people, having more conversations to maintain. There's more maintenance going on.
Mm-hmm. I'm just taking some notes. Yeah.
Carmen says, seems leadership is too overwhelmed to take on new projects or to take risks. So the risk, we were talking earlier about risk averse, right? More of, there's so much risk that, I don't want to do one more thing. I'm not a risk averse. However, I can't put another thing on my plate that could potentially go off track. Terry says survival mode of many people. Whitney says what Carmen said. Okay, that's cool. So Whitney agrees with Carmen, and Dornicke says low productivity. So probably means distraction, or just there's a whole series of things, right, that relate to people being diverted, and that leads to lower productivity.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. All of these things I hear, and more. It's expensive, obviously low productivity is an expensive problem. People being absent because they're burnt out, they're taking mental health days. The physical problems. I saw a statistic that like over 70% of hospitalizations can be prevented, but also are caused by stress, anxiety, worry, right? I also heard a statistic that right now, anxiety and depression are at the highest rates ever. So the good news is people are seeking help. The bad news is the problem is not getting worse. And not only that, I used to say, and I don't know about you all, but can you remember a time, years and years ago, when, and I got advice, from my bosses, keep your personal life personal, don't bring your problems to work. And then, your spouse saying, don't bring your problems home, from work to home. We bring our human to work, period. And we bring our human home from work. And now we have this hybrid, many of us are working in a hybrid situation where we're sometimes working from home. Gosh, that transition's more difficult. Those lines are blurred so much more. And so there's issues, mental health issues. We just can't ignore them anymore. Trust me, I've seen organizations and leaders trying to ignore this problem, sticking their head in the sand about it. And I just get so mad about it, because we can't do that. We are human beings. We're all pretty much wired the same. Okay. So I'm curious. So now those of you who entered that in the chat, thank you. I appreciate that. I want you to imagine what would be possible if this problem was gone, or not even gone. I think that would be a miracle. Let's just say the intensity of this problem for you reduces by 10%, 20%. People are a little bit more productive. They're a little less distracted. They have a little more bandwidth to take on new projects, to say yes to opportunities, to think about growing, rather than going, I'm not going to do anything, like we're hunkered down like little scared rabbits. I'm not going to do anything until the economy changes, or the weather changes, or whatever they believe. So what's possible if you make a 10% or a 20% dent in this problem? And if you could maybe type that in the chat, and then Doug, you can read those off if you would. Gonna get that Jeopardy clock, Doug.
Are you looking for a dollar amount?
Dollar amount, if you know it. Just ballpark it, or how will you feel? What will be different? What's possible? Okay. If there's even a small change in this problem you're experiencing with people being burnt out and distracted and
got it.
Stressed out.
So Carmen has answered that. So a couple things: better job satisfaction, growth opportunities, which opens up the door to things like that, right? So those are so far the comments. I presume that means that because people right now feel like, they just don't want to take on one more thing, and so growth is a thing, right? It's like,
oh, absolutely, yeah. People are just really right now, and this happened when the pandemic hit. Remember that just a couple of years ago. So think about where you're at now and where you'd like to be, okay? And then thinking about that, I want you to think about your teams, okay? Where do you feel your team is today on a scale of 1 to 10? A 10 is absolutely unprepared to weather the storm, and they are just fried, okay? Burnout. And a 1 is not a problem. What's your level of kind of, where's the problem at for you on that 1 to 10 scale today? When you think about yourself and you think about your team when it comes to this problem, okay?
Yeah. Greater than 0.
Yeah, so somebody write that.
Anybody have some numbers? I would say I see a lot of people that are in the 5 to 7 range.
Okay, 5 to 7, yeah. So not too bad. Could be better. Okay. All right.
Not too many at the 10 level.
Not too many at the 10 level. That's delusional. That's another mental health issue. We don't have time to talk about that today.
Because I think you touched on it earlier, is that even if your business is doing well, there's uncertainties, and then there's all this other stuff happening in other parts of the world that it's hard to segregate, right? It's like you can't avoid it. It just keeps coming at you. And it seems like it's endless these last couple of years.
It is, and where else I'm seeing people having, not just internally, in myself as the owner of my company, in my team, in all my employees, all around the globe, and also there's different impacts in different regions too as well. Some regions are more impacted than others with respect to the stress. But what I will say is that, how are your customers being affected? How are your clients being affected when your employees are stressed out, burnt out, worried, anxious, right? So, and some people may not really know because they're not measuring that.
I walked into a conversation a few minutes ago, right before this, with a fellow. I thought he was a Czech Republic fellow, but it turns out he left Ukraine in April, and he fled and with his family, and he set up a business. And so, like, I'm thinking, gee, how's the day going? Well, it's a little hot outside, and this is going well and this is not going well. And then here's a fellow who uprooted his entire family just a few months ago and is under incredible stress. And so those things are happening for all of us, aren't they? Where we're seeing not just our own lives impacted, but the lives of others, even in worse ways. COVID as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. So the last thing I'd like you to put in the chat is, I'd like you to put in, what are you doing? What are you actively doing right now to support yourself as a leader, to support your employees, to help them stay, to help them be more productive, more connected? Maybe type that in the chat. Not maybe, please do.
Keep adding there to the chat. Kind of related to that, Whitney mentioned that employee empowerment leads to more independent motivation versus relying on a champion. The champions are tired. So I think that leads to leaders saying, hey, I want to empower you, and making sure that their teams are empowered, right? That's a really good thought.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. So feel free to continue to add those. I'm going to go ahead because I want to get to the get stuff done part, guys. So Here are the top 3 biggest mistakes, very consistent mistakes, hiding in plain sight mistakes that we see companies make all the time. So what I'm seeing a lot of is we're seeing companies failing to solve the right problem. They're failing to solve the right problem because they don't have the right data. For example, if we feel like we have a toxic culture, or if we feel like we have low engagement, sometimes companies will just do a survey. I just had a client approach me, and we're going to be working with them to do a discovery phase and do a thorough assessment. But they did it and said, well, we did an employee engagement survey. Great, I'd love to see it. Let me see, what we can glean from it. And I looked over that survey, and it had most of the right questions, but it was really missing some critical questions. And so then I said, so what did you do with the survey results? Guess what they said? Any guesses? Nothing. They did nothing with it. Okay, that's a huge mistake. Is a huge mistake. So the second thing is they fail, and I think Carmen may have mentioned this, they fail to empower and support and give the right resources to their managers, because the managers are key, and you all know that, but they are being stretched so thin, especially having to manage a hybrid workforce, for example, or they're feeling their own stressors and worry and anxiety, and they're having to support their people along the lines of, mental health and stress and productivity and performance. And they oftentimes don't, they're not therapists, thank goodness, right? But they're put in this position now that they have, they really have to call on those skills of emotional intelligence and empathy and coaching skills. And many managers aren't equipped naturally, or haven't even been skilled or trained. And the last is failure of companies to co-create metrics. And I'll talk to you about the co-creation part, but even have any kind of metrics or measurements of well-being. And we'll talk a little bit about what's important about well-being here next. Much less do culture assessments or engagement assessments. Sorry about that. A timer has just gone off. I'm not sure why. Okay. Anyway, so what we want to do is we want to make sure that we're not failing in any of those areas and have some things to do. And let me give you an example of kind of having the ladder up a wrong tree, for example. So a lot of companies have the ladder up the wrong tree, and they try to solve a problem, but ladders up the wrong tree. For example, there's a lot of companies today that says, well, we're just going to give our people some time off if they can, because they're burnt out. But the truth is, most people are experiencing, 76% of employees are experiencing burnout. And it is a myth, according to Gallup, and I agree with this, that just reducing hours, if we can right now, will solve that employee burnout, give them a vacation, but that's not the answer, because that's not the cause of burnout. Okay, so what we want to say is, that if we find actually people working more, because they're working from home, right? They can be very, very engaged in their, I'm sure some of you have this, and this might be a good problem for some people, is somebody on your team who works their butt off. I mean, works their butt off. And now that they're not in the office, they're working longer hours. They can be highly engaged and love the heck out of what they're doing and feel like they're making a difference, but they can be working 50, 60 hours a week. And that actually is a recipe for burnout, okay? But the truth is, burnout isn't a result of working more hours. There's many people who work a lot of hours who aren't burnt out. So what we go in is we've gone in and also, have discovered that Gallup's most recent survey, it's called the Global Workforce Report, just came out. If anybody wants a copy of that, I'm happy to send it to you. If you want to just put your name in the chat along, I think we have your emails. If we don't, just put your name and your best contact information in there. I'll get it sent to you. But it's how you experience work during those hours, okay? That's what determines whether or not people get burnout. So here's what we find when we really do the research and assess an organization is there are 5 factors basically that correlate very highly with employee burnout. And Gallup's research says, number 1, and this is basically when this happens, we're speaking about how a person interacts with their direct manager, okay? So unfair treatment at work is the number 1 by far, the number 1 cause of burnout. Having an unmanageable workload is the second. Unclear communication from managers is the third. Lack of manager support is the fourth. And unreasonable time pressure is the 5th cause of burnout, right? So if we're giving people time off because we think they're burnt out, but we're not addressing the issue that they're feeling there's unfair treatment or favoritism, they have an unmanageable workload, they have the communication for the manager is not clear, they don't have support, and unreasonable, due dates and deadlines, then we're not solving the right problem, okay? So just a couple of statistics, and again, I'm happy to share also my presentation slides with you. So if you're interested in those, just put your contact information in the chat and say slides if this is something you'd like. But Gallup has done some really deep dive research into this, and they say our levels of engagement, as you can see globally, is very low, 21%. We've been doing a lot of things in the last 5, 10, 15, 20 years. We have not really moved the needle on increasing engagement, folks. So that's the reality. And then only 33% of employees are thriving in their overall well-being. So if we talk about thriving, we're talking about how people are finding do they feel like their lives are going well? So there's 2 questions regarding thriving. Do you feel like your life is going well on a scale of basically 1 to 10? A 10 is perfect and a 1 is not at all in your mind. And the next question is regarding hope. How hopeful are you that your life will be better in the next 5 years? Basically, there's 2 questions with respect to thriving. And so we're not asking specific work-related questions. We're asking how do you, in your life, right? So this is about my whole person. This isn't about just life at work. And just so some of you, in case some of you aren't familiar with the engagement, is basically our emotional connection to work. Is it meaningful? Is it rewarding? Okay. Both of those numbers are so low. And as you can see, that's an expensive problem. Low engagement and low thriving is something that we can do something about in our organizations. So we look at stress. Okay, so what can we do? What can we control? We can't control the economy. We can control how our employees experience their day-to-day. Okay, so employee well-being. Now this is the new imperative, right? It's not just engagement. It's actually engagement plus well-being is the key to a resilient workforce, to a mentally healthy workforce, right? And not just the person who shows up at work. That mentally healthy person and happy person goes back home and makes it a positive impact on their family and their community. And, I've heard some CEOs say, why am I responsible for this? I'm the boss, right? You know what? It is what it is. People spend more time at work than they do at home. And the truth is you can make more of an impact at work, because we do have more opportunity at work to help people, okay, personally and professionally. So employee engagement and well-being, there's a lot of room for improvement. So let's talk about why. Let's not just put a Band-Aid on a big, huge crack in the bridge, okay? So let's not just do what everybody else is doing. Oh, that sounds like a good idea. Let's make sure we need to identify the missing pieces and apply an effective solution that is specific to our people and our company, okay? So there's, some of you are doing the right things, but let's just make sure you're 100% doing the right things, okay? So here are 3 things that we're going to talk about so that you can get some things done. The first thing is I'm going to highly recommend that you engage, if you are going to do a culture assessment, an employee assessment, if you're going to do any kind of throw money and time at any kind of initiative, leadership development or coaching or training, please engage a third party to conduct a thorough assessment and discovery phase with your organization. And the reason I say third party is not because I want you to bring me in to do it. It's not about me doing it. It's about somebody else outside your organization doing it, because there's so much more value. People are so much more honest when it comes to being asked questions in a stakeholder interview or participating in a focus group, but it's not somebody from the inside, because most people, I feel, have and in some companies, things are so chaotic, sometimes there's a trust issue. And even if there's a little bit of a trust issue, you're not going to get the information you need to make sure that you're solving for the right problem and really hearing from the voice of the people what their experience is, what they think they need compared to what the solution is actually, about. So we just don't want to waste resources. The second is use a 360-degree measurement tool to see how your managers and leaders are really doing, okay? Because I think some people guess in terms of what they need. They think that they're doing a really good job leading and managing. And the truth is maybe they're doing a good job in some areas and they can do an even better job in those areas of strength. But the truth is that people have blind spots. And so in order to really understand what those growth opportunities are, it's really, again, important to do an appropriate assessment and an effective assessment and give people the results of that assessment and what they can do with it. Okay. And not just have oh, this is a nice, a nice description of what I can do better. Really bake that in to their professional development plan, or you break that into your professional development plan so that you can create a plan of action and follow up on the plan of action. I guess that's another big mistake I see. We do an assessment like that one company I was telling you about, but we don't do anything with the results. It's, oh, that's nice. That was fun. That's really interesting to know I am an ESTJ or whatever. Myers-Briggs is, it's just a damn acronym if you don't do anything with it, okay? And the last thing that we'll talk about is being able to identify and then co-create with employees, stakeholders, and the metrics and measurables of what individual success looks like in each role, and make sure that well-being is part of the employee's success, as well as the company culture and engagement assessment, right? So we really want to make sure we're measuring those things, the well-being and engagement, and then getting granular about it, okay? Not just stopping at general vague information, and involving your employees in the process of measurement. I think that's another big mistake, an opportunity that people don't take advantage of. So I wanted to mention, an approach to a discovery phase, a thorough discovery phase. I'm going to share with you the five things that we do, and I want to encourage you, whether it's us or somebody else, to make sure that you incorporate these aspects into thorough discovery, which is a third-party assessment, whether it's a culture assessment, an engagement assessment, and a well-being assessment, or you create your own, which sometimes we do for customers, but make sure that you are assessing all three areas. We want to make sure to do stakeholder interviews, and these are one-on-one 15-20-minute interviews that we have very specific questions that we ask a random sampling of participants, especially if the organization is large. But we pretty much hear very common themes after we do about 2 dozen of these. We hear very common themes in terms of what people need. Focus groups. We also do small focus groups. If you're not participating in a stakeholder interview, the focus groups are really robust conversations that are very facilitated and structured. And I had somebody tell me, he was somebody at the executive level who's participating in a focus groups. And he said, it's interesting. He goes, I kind of looked at this on my calendar initially as something I was going to just, something that was going to take my time. I had no idea it was going to be so helpful and valuable to be part of this focus group, because they take away and they learn from the questions that we ask in those. Then we aggregate all the data that we get from all of these different sources, and then we give the executive team a debrief and suggestions and insights about what to do next. Then we come up with a co-created plan with the stakeholders, not just at the leadership level. So here are 6 things now. I said 5. Here are 6 things you really want to make sure that you do in any discovery phase, okay? So let's move on to the 3 strategies. Told you I was going to go fast. So I have a lot of clients who they invest in their executives with coaching, but they haven't invested in their managers with coaching. And I think Carmen had mentioned empower your managers. Yes, they have to have the skills. Okay, they have to have the skills to be able to have difficult conversations with their direct reports about mental health. And about performance challenges. I think those are the, and also I think another area I see managers really have a hard time with is when there's conflict between coworkers and not knowing how to resolve that conflict. So, you know, I think leadership training and coaching shouldn't just be for executives. We really want to make sure that we're developing their emotional intelligence, which is something we can do. Increase their resilience and agility, because we're demanding so much from our managers as well. So leadership really needs to make sure they invest in resources to do this, and resources, not just money, but time to do it, right? That's the biggest objection I see people have, which, well, I don't feel like this is going to be one more thing I have to do. So you want to make sure that whatever you do, you're going to have to take something off of their plate, at least for the time being, so they can learn and implement. Okay. So those are the things that I really think that as leaders, we can create resources around and ensure people have time and resources to take advantage of the training that you can offer. Okay. Now, why is it important? Well, they say that managers, Gallup says 70% of the variation of team effectiveness or not can be traced back to the manager's ability to connect, to care, to empathize. And sometimes if managers are, you know, their hands are tied, that's not a very fair thing to do to somebody, you know, just as a leader, is to tie their hands and then expect them to engage their team. So leaders also have to be sure that you are removing obstacles and barriers to help managers be the best leaders they can be. Okay. The second strategy is about co-creating performance metrics and expectations with employees. I hear this so much from employees right now, is they don't know what the expectations are. The expectations are changing. They're not even sure what definition of success in their role is. And I see this time and time again. Come on, people. It's not that hard to define success in your role, and not just have a manager define success for a direct report. We're working with one client where we developed scorecards for each individual person. And on that scorecard ties to departmental goals. It also ties to organizational goals. So people can see the difference they're making. Like if you throw a rock into a pond, what's the effect I'm having in my role on the bigger picture in this organization? And that has made such a huge difference. In fact, this particular organization has had 0 turnover in terms of people leaving. I think they've had 2 because people had to relocate for other reasons. But this has helped so much. I've talked to the employees about it, and this is really what they needed. Otherwise, they were kind of coming to work every day and really not really sure what to expect or what they were working toward. But once they made that clear, and the CEO and the COO sat down with each employee, and they co-created definition of success in the role. They identified 2 professional career goals that they wanted to achieve, and 1 personal goal having to do with something in the well-being area: social, financial, physical, mental health, okay, community. So that, and it all, it all circles back to that. And they actually do these reviews. They identify measurable goals, give them the resources and time to achieve the goals, and circle back on a quarterly basis. No more annual reviews. These are quarterly reviews. So people get immediate feedback in a 90-day period. And the third thing is to make sure that you focus, if you have a culture assessment or an engagement assessment, or you create your own, or if you don't create your own, maybe now it's time to put this on your organizational scorecard. So not just your financial metrics, but add elements of well-being. How are you really measuring that with each employee? And then at an organizational level, how are you surveying your employees to see how they are doing with their well-being? It's very easy to do. And there's really zero excuses, to be honest with you folks, not to do it. Okay. So those are the three biggest areas I think are opportunities for growth that you could literally take action on in the next 30 to 60 days, if not sooner. Okay. So I know it may feel like, oh my gosh, it's just one more thing to do, and I don't have the resources to do it, and I've got to climb to this top of the mountain and it's 30 below. The truth is, you just got to figure out what's the first next step. What is the first next step that you can do or take? The first smallest next step, and not a whole bunch of things that you can't implement. But think about the strategic, executable, what's the one first next step I need to take to do this, okay? That was a lot. So what I want to do right now is I want to go, talk about what we've done. I want to go to questions after this, okay? And struggles or objections, okay? So we talked about the three hiding in plain sight mistakes most companies make. We talked about two key areas that business leaders need to measure and act in now. It's engagement and well-being to retain employees. The three key strategies you can act on in the next 60 days, definitely in the next 60 days, if not sooner. And the one process or approach that we use in that discovery phase that you can use also to make sure that you've got your ladder up the right tree. If you are in a position of looking to provide resources for any initiative. Okay. So questions. Go ahead and Doug, if you don't mind monitoring the chat, if you have any questions about the multitude of things I just talked about, I'd be happy to answer them.
There's a lot here. One of the first questions is from Whitney. It's asking, will the deck be available to us?
Absolutely, yeah. So please.
Uh-oh.
Uh-oh, is that a problem? Or you can also email me directly.
No, I'm sorry, I didn't hear you. You broke up, and it may just have been me. But could you just repeat what you just said, just in case it wasn't just me?
You bet. So there are two ways to get the presentation deck. Put your contact information, your email and your name, and say slide deck or presentation in the chat, and I'll get it to you. Or you can also email me directly. Then that's okay. Christina@sustainable-leaders.com.
Okay, and we've got your contact information in the chat as well, and we do have the information for Whitney, so we're good to go on that. That owl staring there reminds me of someone I used to work with, so it's really quite hard to look at. It's very, very strange. One of the things, and while we're waiting for questions to come in, one of the kind of epiphanies that I've received from you today was that concept of everyone being stressed and not wanting to add one more thing to the plate. And then that really, the implication for that is huge, right? In terms of like proposing anything new or going after, as we've talked about, some of the issues that came up, new business and new opportunities, and all of that sounds good, but it's basically all not going to work, right? I mean, it's, how does as from a leadership perspective, do you need to take something off the plate to add something on the plate, or do you convince them that it's really actually not as much risk as you think? Or like, what are there strategies to implement something new? Or, what are some of the thoughts around that side of things?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, Doug. And I think you're absolutely right. So when we take clients through, we call it a strategy session, a strategy day. One of the very last things we do, and they get all excited about something they're going to do that's new or an opportunity to take advantage of, we ask them, what are you going to say no to? How are you going to reprioritize right now? And what are you going to say no to? Because the plate's only so big. And even, it's interesting. I don't know what causes more anxiety. I think what causes more anxiety is people believing that they're already overwhelmed. It's like, I used to be a waitress. Some of you can relate. And we pour the glass of milk, you pour the milk on pour the milk like somebody orders a glass of milk with dinner, and you just over pour. Waitresses don't even just do this. You just over pour just a little bit and you add one more drop and, a whole bunch spills out, right? So even the perspective and the perception of overwhelm causes anxiety. Emotions are caused based on what we believe, right? And so if we believe that we're going to be even more overwhelmed, our heart rate starts to go up, we start to clench our teeth, we start to sweat, we start to, our mind races a million miles a minute based on a thought. It's probably not true, but it just because our brain thinks it is true, then that causes an emotion, energy in motion. Anxiety is an emotion. It's a big emotion, but it's still an emotion. So I think, what are we going to say no to? Okay. Is definitely one question I think leaders need to make a decision about, and to be willing to reprioritize, because their direct reports can't do everything. And sometimes I think leaders forget how much they've asked somebody to do. So as a person who's being asked to do one more thing, I encourage my clients to say to their boss, what would you like me to stop doing? So I'm working on this project, which one of those would you like me to stop doing for right now so that I can do this other thing? Okay.
I love that. And you gave me an idea for a marketing campaign. So I appreciate that. Say no to something and then just kind of go around that. So that's brilliant. Carmen has a question. What are the main objections to measuring employee engagement and well-being? If a leader doesn't value well-being themselves, are they likely to value it for their employees?
No, you're absolutely right. So we can't, if the change doesn't happen to the top, if leadership isn't bought in and walk the talk of what is they say they want everybody else to do, or what matters, that's a recipe for people leaving right there. I think for leaders to ignore the problem and not be willing to address this. I mean, I think I saw it's happened in 2018, 2017, 2018. We knew the great resignation, not the great resignation, but the turnover tsunami is what it was called at the time. And, we were blue in the face to some companies, and they just didn't believe it was going to happen. The leaders who said, you know what, I think that probably could happen, let's get ahead of it now, weren't behind, didn't get hit by the wave to the degree that the people who had their head in the sand about it. So, I'm a firm believer in preaching to the converted and not trying to convert the unconverted. So I believe that, leaders who do get well-being and do get engagement is valuable, but want to take it deeper and really want to make an impact, will be paying attention and taking action in the area of well-being and equipping themselves and their managers with having, the skills to be able to connect and care with their employees who are human, basically.
Got it. No, that sounds good. And we do have Dornicky, Whitney, and Carmen, all of you with your email addresses, and we'll make sure we get you the slides to this. Typically, we'll send out a link to all the attendees with the slides attached to it. So one way or another, or maybe multiple ways, you'll have the slides here quite quickly. Are there any we were right at the top of the hour. So in terms of kind of concluding and moving on, are there any last comments that you'd like to make in closing? Anything you'd like to emphasize or re-emphasize, or anything maybe that that was left out?
Absolutely. Like I said, these resources are very important and valuable, and everybody needs to dig in to see, what they can do in their in their individual organization. So I'm happy to share these resources with you. And I want to make sure that if there is anybody who is thinking about, doing an assessment, doing a survey, getting the pulse of what it is that they need, I'm happy to not necessarily do it for you. It's not necessarily about having me come in to do it, have somebody else come in to do it, but I'd be happy to chat with folks. If you're thinking about an initiative like that, happy to chat with you about some things you may want to make sure to do and to think about. And I feel like I said, I think that we're turning a page here, this great resignation, the COVID, everything that's been happening in the last couple of years. It has really brought to light what people have needed all along, right? Which is to feel cared about, to feel they matter, to feel connected. And there's nothing like a pandemic and a war and an economic downturn, and you name it. People naturally want to feel supported, and they want to connect when they feel stressed. And so hopefully we've been helpful in helping you identify how you can help your employees on a day-to-day basis, so that we can begin to turn this around and see some of those numbers change in the next 12 months with respect to employee well-being, employee thriving, and engagement. So I want to thank you so much for the opportunity, and I really appreciate all of you and your questions, and feel free to reach out if I can be of service.
Christina Haxton, who's the CEO founder at the Center for Sustainable Strategies. She's a member of Global Chamber in the state of Colorado, in the Denver chapter. And she works across the US and may perhaps increasingly around the world. Certainly these are applicable issues for any place in the world. And I know we've got some people here in the audience who are international. Christina has that type of experience as well. The response in the chat area is very positive. So everybody's saying some really nice things. That doesn't always happen. I think people don't, I think usually at Global Chamber, we have really great presentations and all, but it's not always like received like you have been, Christina, in terms of the positive comments. So thank you to Carmen, thank you to Whitney and the others who have created some really positive connections here, hopefully today, and maybe some beginnings of conversations that lead to some amazing results. Christina, thank you so much for your time and really great information.
Thank you for your energy, your time, and your attention. I appreciate it, everybody. Thank you.
Everybody have a great rest of your day and week. Be global and unstoppable. Take care.
Bye.